If your book club is looking for its next selection, there's one book getting all kinds of buzz right now. After the game, Brown told reporters that during games he sometimes reads Inner Excellence, written by Jim Murphy. Now Murphy's book has jumped to #1 on Amazon's bestseller list. It was previously 523,000.
He says he's done this before. I'm calling BS just because there's a zillion cameras.
Yes, I always revert back to like the beginning of the book. It states clear mind and clear consciousness. Nothing matters, negative or positive.
I wanted to seize the opportunity today to shed some light on an ongoing news story, viral sensation in the world of professional sports, and highlight one of Renegade Psych's favorite interviews, a February 2024 interview with guest Jim Murphy, a mental coach who has worked with several notable professional athletes and the author of the now best-selling book, Inner Excellence, who went viral last weekend when the Philadelphia Eagles of the National Football League played the Green Bay Packers in the first round of the playoffs. And media cameras caught Eagles star wide receiver A.J. Brown reading a book on the sidelines during the playoff game. A football player reading a book during a game that is not a playbook, but a good old cover with pages self-help book. The following Monday morning, while traveling to a patient evaluation, I was listening to the Rich Eisen show, a sports talk show, and heard them talking about Jim's book, laughing at the sight of Brown reading on the sidelines during a win or go home playoff game.
I'm wondering if, did Saquon write the book that A.J. Brown was reading? Because it sounds very zen and he doesn't need much self-help. I said, crowd, so somebody must know what it is.
Yep.
Within 30 seconds, you texted it back, right?
Immediate.
It's a book called Inner Excellence by an author, Jim Murphy. Train your mind for extraordinary performance and the best possible life. It's a revised edition.
Images were caught by the media and created a frenzy around Jim's book, spurring Inner Excellence to #1 on the Amazon bestsellers list by Tuesday morning. In all genres, just ahead of Onyx Storm, which is a fantasy dragon novel. Sales of the book skyrocketed to 53+ million% on Tuesday following the Sunday game, with his previous highest rating on Amazon book sales close to 10,000. And prior to Brown reading Inner Excellence on the sidelines, Inner Excellence was ranked more than 500,000th on Amazon's bestsellers list, from 500,000th to first overnight, essentially. I was so stoked for Jim when I heard Rich Eisen drop not only his name, but the name of his book. And they did a prolonged segment with some laughs about an NFL player reading on the sidelines of a playoff game, which is just a funny visual to see one of the most athletic people in the world, a perennial Pro Bowler, aka an all-star in football, sitting calmly and quietly on the sidelines ingesting a paperback. At the time, there were 7.5 minutes left in the game with the Eagles up 9 points, and A.J. Brown was having his worst statistical outing of the year with 1 catch for 10 yards.
1 catch, 10 yards, and I'm assuming 10 pages at least he read of this book.
But Brown, who is reading a book that is predicated on engaging in the process without getting too caught up in the outcomes or not letting your inner voice or your mind judge your results as they happen so aggressively, Brown responded to questions about whether or not he was frustrated.
Were you frustrated when you were reading the book?
No, I was not frustrated at all. I figured that's what y'all probably thought. I wasn't frustrated. Why y'all always think I'd be frustrated? Like, dang, yeah, I read the book. Yeah, I like to read. So.
Brown states that he reads on the sideline often, but the cameras just happen to catch him at the right time. In an interview with Murphy by Philadelphia's NBC 10, completed yesterday, he states he was intrigued to see Brown reading his book after multiple drives this season, but also stoked it's getting the media attention it is now. So first and foremost, I want to encourage viewers and listeners to return to my exclusive interview with Jim from February of 2024 about this book, back when it was 500,000th plus on the bestseller list, and he wasn't nationally recognized like he is now. I'll repost the interview in its entirety, as the original version's broken up into multiple segments as episodes. It is also a audio interview before I started to do video interviews and adding graphics on YouTube. So I went through and added a bunch of relevant graphics, but you won't see myself or Jim in the flesh or on video during this interview. I also wanted to review a little bit more about Brown's season, AJ Brown's season, some of the turmoil that has come with it, and how Jim Murphy's book has helped to guide Brown through some of his tribulations and not allow his self-perception to be overly affected by the circumstances or the results, or put another way in terms of ACT terminology, the outcome of his efforts. Earlier this season, Fox Sports reported what they called was a family feud within the Eagles locker room after a rocky mid-season 2-game stretch in which A.J. Brown only caught 9 passes for around 110 yards. Both were wins, by the way. Eagles teammate, defensive end Brandon Graham, was quoted at the time as saying that they were friends before this, things have changed.
All I'm saying is AJ's not really wrong, and he didn't throw his quarterback under the bus. And now when a teammate steps out and says this, that, and the third, now AJ got to answer all these questions. Yeah.
And around the same time, Brown was critical of their team's offense, stating their offense wasn't playing up to standard after sputtering to a 22-16 win versus league punching bag, the Carolina Panthers. Brown added his frustrations were obviously not about running the ball, as they have the league's top rusher in Saquon Barkley. We have to pass the ball. And he stated getting on the same page with Jalen Hurts, the quarterback of the Eagles, was important.
But we've all had beef with their teammate. We might beef, and then weeks later, we might get on the same page. That happens in every locker room. No, I mean, seriously.
The media took the story and ran with it, emphasizing this possible rift between Brown and Hurts, who were longtime friends even before they were Eagles teammates, with Hurts reportedly being godfather to Brown's daughter. The following week, in a 27-13 blowout win against the cross-state rival Pittsburgh Steelers, Hurts threw a touchdown pass to Brown, and they proceeded to celebrate together, recreating a 1988 Rollin' with Kid and Play music video dance move. Kid and Play are a musical group notable for their choreographed hip-hop dance moves that gained additional notoriety for their 4-movie series through the 1990s titled House Party. So how did I connect with Jim Murphy? Well, I have John Middle to thank for that. We graduated from medical school together, but John never pursued residency because his business venture, Focus, a healthier alternative to coffee and sugary energy drinks, took off by the time we had graduated. While John and I were talking about Renegade Psych and discussing the basis of ACT or acceptance and commitment training or therapy, his mind spontaneously went to his previous interactions with Jim Murphy. And he said, you really got to interview this guy. You all would get along. You all talk about a lot of the same concepts. He connected me to Jim, and our conversation was riveting. It was memorable. In reading his book, so many of the therapeutic concepts I had learned through my exposure to Stephen Hayes and the ACT and relational frame theory community were mirrored in Jim's book and throughout our interview. But Jim had no exposure to ACT or its theoretical basis, relational frame theory. He took an entirely different path than I did through a failed venture to become a professional baseball player to an educational background in psychology and neurolinguistics. But we both arrived at close to the same destination in terms of emphasizing processes to those that we work with that lead to more meaningful and fulfilled value-based living. Some of the basic tenets laid out in his book include that self-centeredness is the greatest challenge we face in life and sports, and that selflessness is fearlessness. That you can develop the habits every day of thought and action around the person that you want to become and what's most important to you. And that you can create a healthy separation between your automatic thoughts reflecting on the past and trying to predict the future and your conscious decisions about what you actually do in life. I heard a lot of acceptance, diffusion, mindfulness, perspective taking, values, and committed action talk in our conversation. But again, it's so cool to me that Jim got there through a very different path and really expanded on my perspective about ACT. So I hope you enjoyed this hour-long conversation with Amazon's now #1 best-selling author as of the time that I'm recording this. Unfortunately, it wasn't recorded on video, but I've added pictures and graphics to our previous conversation to make it a little bit easier to follow. I hope you enjoy. Feel free to reach out to renegadepsych@gmail.com, especially if you want me to do more sports-related interviews, since I can only rail against the healthcare industry so much without becoming too negative. And I really do enjoy talking with others on how any of us, professional athlete or not, can improve our lives and chase the characteristics of who we want to be and what we want to be about.
I don't know what that means. Does that mean that
it's been updated,
Well,
perhaps?
or is it initially called outer excellence? Or is it the